Hello, this is the Harboring Light. I'm Mary. I give a conservative perspective about the world around me. So, my social media links will be provided along with my email, Substack, and also feedback is greatly important. So, it really help out and be greatly appreciated to give me ratings on all of the podcast platforms I'm on. And also, you want to support my content, whether written on Substack or my podcast, click on that Buy Me a Coffee link. It would also be greatly appreciated. And also to add on, I'm in the process of working out, and as I mentioned in my harboring notes, of going into the venture of merchandise for all of y'all, as a way to get more connected and have more of a feel for my podcast and, the branding behind it and all of that. So I would really, really appreciate, and I welcome emails from all of you, and my email will be provided of the particular type of merch you all would like, and I'll go from there. Okay, so audio platforms on my Audible, Amazon Music, Spotify for podcasters, Overcast, Pocket Cast, Pandora, iHeartRadio. And I'm definitely looking to grow to wherever you enjoy your content, particularly podcast content, that is. I am on that. So this episode is all about the songs, some of them I mentioned on Monday with Peter, Paul, and Mary. All right, so let's dive in. Okay, so I'm going to cover a few Peter, Paul, and Mary songs. I think these songs go into depth of what I want to say, and as far as covering all the background and everything else that I talked about on Monday. So let's dive in. Day is Done by Peter, Paul, and Mary. Now, this was a part of the album Peter, Paul, and Mommy of 1969. Charted 21 in the U.S. Day is Done is a message to a child letting him know that his father will be there to help him through troubled times. And now, all this source from Songfacts will be available for all of you on Friday. So, in a Songfacts interview with Peter Yarrow, who wrote the song, he explained this. And this is what he says as quoted. It was written at the height of the anti-war movement. And really, I was thinking about my brother and the possibility of his being drafted. My younger brother, I wrote it from that perspective. The song first appeared on Peter, Paul, and Mary album of children's songs, Peter, Paul, and Mommy. The trio often included songs for kids on their album, famously Puff the Magic Dragon. Alright, so let me go into that. Puff the Magic Dragon, Peter, Paul, and Mary, of course, and as part of the album Moving of 1963. And it charted number 2 in the U.S. This song was rumored to be about drugs, particularly marijuana. This rumor was fueled by a 1964 Newsweek article about hidden drug messages in pop music that came up with the following interpretations. Puff's friend Jackie Paper equals rolling papers. Puff equals to make a puff from a joint. Dragon equals a variation of dragon, as in taking a drag from a joint to inhale the smoke. The band claimed that the song is really about losing the innocence of childhood, and that has nothing to do with drugs. At the end of the song, Puff goes back to his cave, which symbolizes the loss of childhood innocence. Peter Yarrow wrote the song in 1958 before he joined the group. He started with a poem his roommate, Lenny Limpton, left in his typewriter. So, a few years after the song became a hit, Yarrow found Limpton and gave him half the songwriting credit. Limpton, who was a camp counselor when Yarrow found him, gets extensive royalties from the song. Limpton went on to develop a system for projecting films into 3D. For his book Behind the Hits, John Java spoke with Lenny Limpton about the poem that sparked the song. Limpton was feeling homesick when he wrote it. One day, he was on the way to dinner at a friend's house and was a little early. So he stopped at the library and happened to read some Oden Nash poems. The title of the poem that grabbed him was The Tale of Custard the Dragon, which is really about a really old, truly old dragon. Limpton was friends with Peter Yarrow's housemate when they were all students at Cornell University. On the walk from Cornell's library to the friend's house, where he was to eat dinner, he wrote the poem, which was about the loss of childhood. But no one was home when he arrived. There was some sort of mix-up about dinner. So he just went and used Yarrow's typewriter to get the poem out of his head. Then he forgot about it. Years later, a friend called and told him Yarrow was looking for him. To give him credit for the lyrics, Limpton had actually forgotten about the poem. Thanks to John Jaban, I think, for sharing the story. The original poem had a verse that did not make it into the song. In it, Puff found another child and played with him after returning. After neither Naro nor Limpton remembered the verse in detail, and the paper that was left in Yarrow's typewriter in 1958 has since been lost. In effort to the gender neutral, Peter Yarrow later sang a line, "A dragon lives forever, but not so little boys," as "A dragon lives forever, but not so girls and boys." In 1964-53, Douglas a C-47 passenger plane were armored and subsequently deployed as gunships by the United States Air Force in Vietnam War. The planes carried tremendous firepower, shooting bright flares and rounds of machine guns fired on the Viet Cong, which referred to them as dragon ships. This nickname led to Americans to start calling the planes Puff the Magic Dragon, turning the title of the winsome child song into a lethal killing machine. Some of the alleged drug reference is in this song, including the Autumn Mist, which was marijuana smoke, and the land of Hanalei, which was the Hawaiian town for Hanalei, I believe the pronunciation of that, famous for its marijuana plants. Peter Yarrow insists that not only did the song have nothing to do with drugs, but he didn't even know about pot until 1958, which kills any theories that he put drug references in it subconsciously. The song was banned in Singapore and Hong Kong because authorities thought it contained drug references. Peter, Paul, and Mary in 1961. Peter, Paul, and Mary formed in 1961, and this song was almost a part of their repertoire, although they did not recover until their second album, Moving, which was released in early of 1963. The first concerts of Peter, Paul, and Mary consisted of a solo set by each of the men, followed by a dozen songs as a trio, which is when they perform Puff. Paul Stokey put the song on trial during a 1976 show at the Sydney Opera House. He had a prosecutor on stage claiming the song was about drugs. With Jackie and Puff explaining that it wasn't, Stokey told the audience that if they sang along, Puff would be acquitted, which they did. The judge declared case dismissed. All right, then wrapping this up. In order to show the stupidity of calling this a drug song, the band sometimes performed the Star Spangled Banner at concerts and paused periodically to explain how the previous lines could describe drugs or drug-induced hallucinations. In the 2000 movie, Meet the Parents, the family has a conscious debate over the meaning of the song. And the scene, this song comes on the car radio, and Jack Fokker, Ben Stiller, says to Jack Burns, Robert De Niro, who'd have thought it wasn't about dragon? Some people think that to puff the magic dragon means to smoke a marijuana cigarette. Burns replied, Puff is just the name of the boy's magical dragon. You a pothead, Fokker? When this was played on Bob Keeshner's TV show, Captain Kangaroo, the accompanying illustration seemed to reflect the missing fourth verse. During the final chorus, the word "but wait" appeared on the screen. Another child who looks like a little cave boy is seen knocking on the door to Puff's cave. The final picture shows Puff and the new little boy embracing. In 1969, Peter, Paul, and Mary released a children's album called Peter, Paul, and Mommy, in which this song is featured on. All right, For Loving Me. Now, this song appeared on the album A Song Will Rise, and it was released in 1965, and it charted 30 in the U.S. Gordon Lightfoot wrote For Loving Me, which he called probably the most chauvinistic song I have ever wrote. So the song goes in, leaving the girl, and on the way out, letting her know that he's had 100 more just like her, and will have 1,000 more before he's through. And that's not all. Just when her heart starts to mend, he'll be coming back around to break it again. For Loving Me was Gordon Lightfoot's first hit as a songwriter. He hadn't yet launched his solo career. The song was recorded by the folk trio Peter, Paul, and Mary, who helped put Bob Dylan on the map with their cover of Blowing in the Wind. The song seems out of character for them, but it did well, rising to number 30 in the U.S. Peter Yarrow saw something in it, a tongue-in-cheek sort of approach to the situation. Lightfoot wrote in the complete greatest hits collection. Fortunately for me, it became a big hit. I was happy to have been a part of their career. Lightfoot goes on to say, in 1970, he released his Crumbling Marriage on If You Could Read My Mind. With this, which became a huge hit. Around 2002, Lightfoot stopped performing For Loving Me out of respect for his first wife. He married 2 more times and the daughter he had with her. So, goes on to say, let me back up with this. Go on to say, this is what I mean. Lightfoot was married at the time and later confessed that he'd been unfaithful. So this goes to explaining all of this and jumping back in, which ties into what I was saying about in 1970 as addressing his crumbling marriage with this song, If You Could Read My Mind. Okay. The song helped get the attention of Bob Dylan's manager, Albert Grossman, who took Gordon Lightfoot as a client. With Grossman's help, Lightfoot released his first album, Lightfoot, in 1966, with his own version for Loving Me included. Peter, Paul, and Mary recorded another Gordon Lightfoot song as well, Early Morning Rain, which went to number 91 later in 65. All right. And let me wrap up with this song. Leaving on a Jet Plane. It's part of the album 1700. It was released in 1969, charted number 2 in the UK and number 1 in the US. This was written by a very young John Denver, who was then a member of the Chad Mitchell Trio before beginning a solo career in the 70s. Denver wrote this song in 1967 during a layover at Washington Airport. Not so much from feeling that way for someone, but from the longing of having someone to love. The Chad Mitchell Trio recorded the song that year, as did Spanky and Our Gang and Peter, Paul, and Mary. It only became a hit when the later act covered the song again 2 years later. One of the BBC radio specials, John Denver said, "This is a very," and it is quoted, "This is a very personal and very special song for me. It doesn't conjure up Boeing 707s or 747s for me as much as it does the simple scenes of leaving, bags packed and standing by the front door, taxi pulling up in the early morning hours, the sound of a door closing behind you, and the thought of leaving someone that you care for very much. I was fortunate to have Peter, Paul, and Mary recorded and have it become a hit, but it still strikes a lonely and anguished chord in me because the separation still continues, although not so long and not so often nowadays." And to add on, I will talk about John Denver and Gordon Lightfoot as I go on through the series of songwriters, American folk songwriters, that is. The 1969 hit version by Peter, Paul, and Mary came at a great time for Denver, who had just disbanded the Chad Mitchell Trio. Denver became the senior member of the group when Joe Frazier and Mike Colebrook left. Denver replaced Chad Mitchell, choosing an audition that drew about 300 singers, but no name recognition. Some of his first solo appearances were billed as John Denver, writer of Leaving on a Jet Plane. Known for this song, Denver got some club appearances, TV gigs, which helped him launch his career as one of the biggest selling artists of the 70s. In The Office episode Launch Party 2007, Michael Scott sings this before he and Jim hit the road for New York City. Instead of a jet plane, he changes the lyrics to "I'm leaving inside of Jim's car." So my ending thoughts, I'm going to work my way backwards as far as addressing giving my thoughts on the entertainment aspects of, as far as television shows and movies about Peter, Paul, and Mary's music, and then give my thoughts on the content as far as the hidden symbols and everything else. So I think it's very interesting. So let me start out talking about The Office. And I think it's very interesting with Steve Carell when he played Michael Scott on the U.S. version of The Office. That show, I mean, it's not for everyone, but that show, I think it was really great when Steve Carell was a part of the cast, and then I think it just fell downhill when he left. But anyhow, the main presence of that show is shedding a light on doing a social commentary, so to speak, and I think it ties into, even more so, amplifies that, where it's a documented style of format of a television show of the trials and the ins and outs of personal lives, and then the lives of what you go through as far as your work life. And it's very interesting because a lot of the times which is greatly highlighted, and I'm gonna go to Ricky Gervais as far as, because this is what is the Office, U.S. Office version is based off of Ricky Gervais, the UK original version of The Office. So you have to be, it's 9 times out of 10 that it's not always the case, but mostly in a work environment it's encouraged to be politically correct. So when you delve into this is saying that most of the times, if you have viewing differences about things, and if you just call things for what it is, it's discouraged and you're looked down upon, and it's really something to say about that. And let's go to Ricky Gervais. So, if I'm not mistaken, it's quite interesting how the whole thing with The Office came about. Because if I'm not mistaken, I think Ricky Gervais said, paraphrasing, I think he said that he was in a new wave band in the 80s, and it fell flat, and so, he had to find work, and he levitated towards an office job. And so the grind of that and the mundane reality of that, he wanted to find an outlet to work through all the frustrations of it. And so The Office spanned out of it. So I think this also relates back to Peter, Paul, and Mary, particularly with making commentary about the the society in which they live in, and giving awareness to that. And so let's go back to Ricky Gervais with the UK Office. British humor, it's not for everyone too, but I appreciate with British humor, most of the time it's blunt and it's upfront and it's straightforward, and it's well crafted and written well, and it's with that straightforwardness, and that's not for everyone, but it's really tying into the expectations of what is said within comedy and humor, and particularly British humor. And so with that, with Peter, Paul, and Mary, it's quite interesting to me that when you delve deep within their music and in their stance with where they see things politically and where they see things as far as societal issues, their stance as far as family and all of these things, merging these things together, I think that it helps to ground a sense of depth in their music. So it mirrors the light and pushes things to the next level to get people to think about things as far as for instance, let's tie this back into Meet the Fockers. Well, not Meet the Fockers, Meet the Parents, that is. And this song is simply about what Puff the Magic Dragon that is. It's simply about what happens when you go through the phases of losing your innocence. And it's quite interesting that people put all these adult taboos into it to dredge away from the important message of it. And you never know, that could be their point in doing it, but underlyingly, no, it's not. But it's something to think about. So within that, for instance, let's go back to Meet the Parents. It's a running concept and a running theme that I think is saying that finding something that's innocent and obscuring it and making it deviant and stripping it away from the importance and the life lessons that can be uplifted when you tap into the importance of speaking to children and knowing that you hear them and you listen to how they feel and how they see things, and you're not trying to talk down to them. And then what happens when you meld in your adult sort of perspective, corrupted perspectives, and mingle that and make it something completely different with all these marijuana and drug uses that has been enlaced in this song throughout the years. And I think it's very funny that it links into the theme of this song, which is the natural intention is about losing innocence. And because of that, we have this new perspective. Alright, so this reaches the end of the Harboring Light. And again, feedback is greatly, greatly important. So please feel free to give me a rating on all of the podcast platforms that I'm on. And also comments, questions, concerns is greatly appreciated. So email me too. And also, as I mentioned, with the email, merchandise ideas that you guys would like to see, you all would like to see, email me too. Tune in, turn up, and definitely take care. All right, so on to next week.